Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Fadi Gwanny on Life Talks Live. This week we're talking about compassion, and in specific, my talk today will be about self-compassion. The ultimate question is, what makes people incapable of having compassion to others? You see, when we think about it and we look around, like all the previous coaches said in the previous days, the world is losing compassion for one another. The question is, why are they losing compassion for one another? Where is that rooting from? Where is it coming from within us? And if we understand what is happening inside of us, we're going to be able to reach out and have true compassion for the world, to others. So let's take a quick 7-minute tour into our own minds and hearts and what we do and how we torture ourselves to an extent where we are incapable of having compassion for others. This is Fadi Gwanny and this is Life Talks Live. The ultimate question that we are starting with, where does the lack of compassion to other people come from? And here raises another question. If you lack self-compassion, if you are unforgiving to yourself, if you are operating from that source, how can you possibly have compassion for others? If you don't forgive yourself for anything you've done, how can you forgive others? You see, this all comes from a major state of submission to the self-critic. The self-critic, that sound in our head, that noise. I don't want to call it a voice, but it's more like a noise that keeps baggering on. That self-critic, where does that self-critic get its information from? You know, that same voice that keeps telling you what you're doing is horrible, you're bad, how could you have done that? How could you not be up to that standard and image that I've created for you? I've created this amazing image of a fantastic person and you're messing it up. You're screwing it up. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. Where does that self-critic, let's start understanding it. We all recognize a self-critic, but where does that self-critic get its information from? Start observing all the authoritative people or voices in your life, starting from parents, teachers, religious figures, bad friends, bosses, all these people who have created in your own mind how you should be, a frame they've placed you in, what you should do, and what you're not doing. And what you need to do if you're not that. How far can you punish yourself to motivate yourself? You see, we mix between self-criticism and motivation. We reach a point where we accept everything what that self-critic says and hope that's our only motivation to move forward. And when we do that, we're in a constant state of suffering. We're not accepting ourselves anymore. We do a mistake, we kill ourselves over it. We just punch ourselves to the ground, we bury ourselves. We can't accept ourselves less than that frame that self-critic has drawn us in. Now I want you to imagine a person who doesn't like themselves anymore. They've reached a state and they hate themselves. They can't accept themselves. They're not doing what they should do according to the self-critic and all the information they've been getting across their lives. They're not being that perfect employee, that motivational person. They're not being the perfect husband. They're not being the perfect father, the perfect brother, the perfect friend, the perfect artist, the person who wants to have an adventure. All these frames of what you should be. And they're not doing very well there. Now from that place, they start observing others. And especially when they're too tired of dealing with themselves, they focus their full attention onto the next person. And what happens when you do that? When you do that, if you are fully submissive to the self-critic, you believe everything that self-critic says, you allow yourself to torture and hurt yourself with whatever that self-critic tells you, how can anybody else in front of you survive that? If you don't have compassion for yourself as a human being, as a growing spirit, as a person who needs to try things and learn and grow and fall, if you don't have that compassion for yourself, and you're in a constant state of negativity, if you're not there, what happens? How could the other person survive that critic? How could you have compassion for somebody who's doing something in your frame of a mind is wrong or shouldn't be? Now, let me give you this quick test to know where you stand. If you face somebody who's wronged you or is doing a general wrong, and you need to forgive them, however your self-critic says, if you forgive them, and notice the voice, please, I'm sure we're all going to connect with that voice. If you forgive that person, they're going to do it again. If you forgive that person, they're going to take advantage. If you forgive that person, they're going to lazy out. They're going to get the wrong idea. Now that's the voice that meets you with every wrongdoer in front of you, to you, or around you. That's the same voice that talks to you. That if you forgive yourself, you're going to lazy out. If you forgive yourself, you're going to do the same wrong thing again. You see, if you're incapable of forgiving and having compassion for yourself, you will never forgive or have compassion for anybody around you, starting from the closest to the furthest apart. Why don't we have compassion with others? Why don't we have compassion with their mistakes? Because we don't have any of that for ourselves. We're in a state of negativity and torture. And that's what we reflect and project onto everybody around us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to have a true compassion for yourself, if you want to have true compassion for the world around you, it starts with knowing yourself, knowing your self-critic, quieting him. It starts with forgiving yourself, understanding you're here to learn. You're on this planet for a few years, and then you're gone. Allow yourself space. Allow yourself to be life, not just live, to experience life as it happens. Be okay with that. Embrace your dark side. Don't resist it. And allow from there the light to shine through. Thank you very much for bearing with me today. And I hope that the world becomes way more compassionate by accepting yourself, by loving yourself, by forgiving yourself. Have a blissful evening, ladies and gentlemen. And tomorrow, Kelsey talks about compassion as well. And I'm looking dire forward towards it. Have a blissful evening.